Charlie, Ken, and Jude.
Welcome, and thank you for joining us today for the Budget Development Process presentation. I'm Terry Cranefeld, Manager of Communications for Hartford County Public Schools, and I'm joined today by our Superintendent, Barbara Canavan, and our Chief of Administration, Joe Licata. We're going to start with a presentation of the process and then move into an introduction into an input tool for your use. At this time, I'd like to introduce you to our Superintendent, Barbara Canavan.
Thank you, Terry. For those of you with whom I have not had the pleasure of meeting, I am Barbara Canavan, Interim Superintendent of Hartford County Public Schools. First, let me welcome you and thank you for taking time out of your busy schedules to view this presentation regarding the development of the 2014-15 operating budget. Before we begin, I would like to outline for you the purpose of our presentation. We are beginning our year-long budget development process. I am grateful that you have decided to partner with me in this critical endeavor. Together with my leadership team, we are committed to engaging you and our employees at every step in this process. The purpose of this presentation is to provide you with important information regarding the budget development process and the timeline. We will show you how you can partner with Hartford County Public Schools and become truly involved. I encourage your thoughts, your comments, and your suggestions regarding your priorities. These suggestions, thoughts, and comments will assist us in developing our proposed budget. Our budget priorities have not been set. We plan to use all of the feedback to assist us in developing our budget for the 2014-15 school year. You may submit your comments, suggestions, and thoughts in writing directly by emailing the dedicated budget email account at budget@hcps.org. For more information and to stay up to date on this process, please visit www.hcps.org/budget. As we begin our presentation, I would like to introduce our Chief of Administration, Mr. Joe Licata, who will go into more detail regarding this process.
Thank you, Mrs. Canavan. The annual operating budget is developed to provide the daily operations of the public school system, including teaching and learning, transportation, maintenance of our facilities, feeding our students, training our teachers and staff, and providing all of the services required to deliver our educational programs to our students and parents. The process of creating a proposed budget begins by projecting ahead 12 to 18 months. Unfortunately, the budget evolves over time because we are not provided with specific numbers at the very beginning of the process. For example, increases to healthcare costs, negotiated agreements with the various bargaining units, utility costs, and unfunded mandates by the federal and state governments all require adjustments to the budget as we move through the process. The basic timeline for the development of the 2015 budget begins in October as the superintendent and her staff begin to develop baseline budget estimates, program goals and priorities, enrollment data, and projected per pupil funding allocations. In November, the superintendent holds public input sessions to receive input for the proposed budget. You will hear more about this schedule and a new tool that has been developed to gather public input for the proposed budget. After a review of all the information, the superintendent prepares a recommendation to the Board of Education for the recommended fiscal year operating budget. In December, the superintendent hands off the budget recommendations to the Board of Education. At this time, budget allocations are refined from the state of Maryland, providing insight as to the potential level of funding that we may expect from the state. In some years, that revenue increases. Last year, it decreased by approximately $4 million. In January, the Board of Education hears public comment and conducts workshops to consider the superintendent's recommended budget. The board reviews and amends the recommended budget and finalizes a Board of Education FY15 operating budget request. During the months of February and March, the board presents its budget request to the county executive and engages in conversations with the county executive regarding the request. An important milestone occurs in April, when the county executive announces his proposed funding level for the Board of Education budget and sends the budget request to the Harford County Council for its review and consideration. During April and May, the County Council holds public hearings, meets with the Board of Education to review the budget request, and makes a final determination by June 15th. The Budget Office then reviews and prepares funding alternatives for the superintendent and the Board of Education. The board then approves a final budget in June. Funds become available on July 1st after the county executive and the county council sign the official Maryland State Department of Education appropriations documents. Before we get into the details of the operating budget, it is important to understand where funding comes from and the difference between the basic types of funding that the school system receives. Public school systems in Maryland are considered fiscally dependent. That means that all of our funding, called revenues, come from three primary sources. Those are the federal government, state government, and county government. When the Board of Education prepares its annual budget proposal, costs in excess of the projected federal and state of Maryland resources are requested from the Harford County government. You can see the funding sources on the top of the slide. It is all of these funds together that fund the school district. Fund balance is an additional resource for the fiscal year budget. We have to plan our budget on the current available information, and it is our best guess about predicted costs at that point in time. Several factors influence the amount of fund balance that may exist at the end of a fiscal year. Prudent management of funds and reduced spending as compared to the budgeted costs. An example to help illustrate these factors, during the building of the budget, we may have predicted fuel costs at $4 per gallon and budgeted for 100,000 gallons. The actual cost of fuel during the year might have been $3 per gallon. We would have a savings of $100,000. That would go into the fund balance, but it is considered one-time money because we can't count on this same level of savings in the next year. Our topic today is the unrestricted or operating budget, but we are going to review the definitions of each of the funding sources before we move forward. The unrestricted or operating fund finances the day-to-day expenses of running the school system, like salaries, supplies, transportation, and utilities. It is primarily funded by the Harford County government and the state of Maryland. Restricted funds, also known as grant funds, are allocated by the federal or state government. These funds are dedicated for a specific purpose and stipulated as a condition of accepting these resources. Food service funds are an independent fund. It is a self-supporting enterprise from the income generated from providing meals to our students. Capital funds finance the design and construction of new facilities, expansion of existing facilities, and major renovation or replacement projects. The capital budget follows a slightly different calendar and is typically discussed separately from the operating budget. One important note is that decisions made relative to the capital budget impact decisions regarding the operating budget. An example would be the decision to build a new school would include the need to have ongoing costs for hiring staff, heating, cooling, and maintaining the facility, which would be located in the operating budget. Now that we have a sense of where the money comes from, we're going to take a look at where the money goes. One way to look at spending is to look at the type of spending. Educating students is a labor-intensive process. For that reason, the largest share of any school district's budget goes to pay for employee wages and benefits. As the graphic shows, 82%, or 82 cents of every dollar, goes to pay for the salaries and benefits of Harford County Public Schools employees. That leaves 18%, or 18 cents on every dollar, to pay other expenditures, including contracted bus services, utilities, instructional supplies and materials, purchased services, and insurance. Purchased services are those times when we need to go outside of our system when we don't have the required expertise. For example, they would include hiring a contractor to repair a roof or to install a carpet, inspection fees, or consulting services. With 82% of the school budget being allocated to employee wages and benefits, it is important to consider a few details. Harford County Public Schools is a large organization employing nearly 5,400 people. 93% of Harford County Public School employees work inside school buildings or provide direct services to our approximately 38,000 plus student enrollment. Of the school-based staff, more than 60% are teachers. The rest are paraprofessionals, administrators, secretaries, custodians, bus drivers and attendants, inclusion helpers, and food service workers. Only 7% of all full-time and part-time employees do not work in the schools or provide direct services to students. Some activities of any large organization are handled more efficiently on a centralized basis. Specific examples include accounting, finance, human resources and purchasing functions, as well as support services for our teachers and staff. There are certain elements of the building of proposed budget that are somewhat uncertain and create a challenge. There are uncontrollable costs of health care rates, insurance premiums, mandated services, and non-public tuition. There are a number of challenging issues and trends that affect the school system budget. Rising special education costs, uncertain economic climate that we've seen in the last 4 years, rising health care costs, maintaining competitive wages, and certainly shifts in public education that relate to the Common Core curriculum, PARCC testing, and the technology required to implement those shifts are all required to be considered in the operating budget of the Board of Education. Mrs. Kranefeld will now talk about other issues that need to be considered in the development of the operating budget.
Embedded in the budget process is the collective bargaining process. HCPS works with 5 bargaining units that represent all of our employees. Negotiations begin shortly after the Thanksgiving holiday and are generally to be completed by January 1. This timeline provides the board with the opportunity to place negotiated fiscal items into the board's proposed budget. The request for funding by the board is a critical element of good faith bargaining and adheres to the Fairness in Negotiations Act. As of 5 years ago, the Board of Education developed a collective bargaining website, which can be found on the school system website at www.hcps.org and clicking on the board tab on the left-hand side. There you will find information specific to each of our 5 bargaining units as they move through the bargaining process. The public can become involved in the budget process by staying informed and providing input. The first way, staying informed. We have an hcps.org website where we house budget information as we move through the budget process. In addition, HCPS has a Facebook and a Twitter handle. Both of those tools will be updated continuously throughout the process. Our school newsletters and newspapers also contain important information as we move through. The second step is to be part of the discussion. The first way is through the dedicated email address that Ms. Canavan talked about earlier, which is budget@hcps.org. This email site will be maintained throughout the process, and all information submitted to that email address will be shared with the superintendent and the Board of Education. In addition, as Mr. Licata mentioned, we will be using an online budget input submission tool that was developed this year, and Mr. Licata will go through that in just a second. Also, Board of Education budget work sessions that are held in January and public business meetings, which are held twice a month, can also be attended and where public input is taken. The county government also holds its own budget hearings, and those times are listed on their website as well. At this time, Mr. Licata is going to go through the new online budget input tool.
In addition to the various input mechanisms that Ms. Kranefeld spoke about, we developed an interactive tool for those who expressed an interest in developing a more in-depth and detailed understanding of the operating budget process and who are interested in offering a proposal that involves meaningful and thoughtful suggestions to add value to the school system. Essentially, what we're doing is providing the same data and information that we all use to develop the annual budget, including a link to our entire current FY 2014 budget. Basically, what we're doing is opening our books to the community, using real, actual budget numbers and the real terminology used in developing a budget. In this tool, you'll have the opportunity to provide meaningful suggestions for developing new revenue streams, for adding items that will enhance the delivery of instruction, increase student achievement, or improve the educational experience for our students, help increase our efficiency, or remove items from the budget for cost savings measures. However, we feel that all of these must come with a measure of accountability. So in the end, you must provide a rationale for your proposal, and you must submit a balanced budget. In other words, whatever you propose must result in the expenses matching the revenues. Let's take a look at the budget input tool. You'll see that we have provided a checkbook that provides or follows a logical progression of steps in the budget development process. It's the same process, it's the same steps that we use as we develop the budget. We start by talking about revenues. Revenues is the money that we receive, and they're in prescribed categories that mirror our budget book that you will find online. Next, you will find a list of what we call cost of doing business items. Those are items that are non-negotiable. Those are items that need to be considered right off the top because they're required to operate the daily operations of the school system. For example, if there is an increase in healthcare costs, if there is an increase in fuel or utilities, or any expenses that have increased that are not negotiable, you will not be able to alter the items in the cost of doing business. Next, you'll see an area where you can include enhancements to the school system budget. Those items that will help improve student achievement or that might improve the efficiency of the school system. You will also find a place where you can add or delete items required to balance your budget. Throughout the budget tool, you will find numerous help buttons. These are items where you'll see a symbol encircled with either a pencil or a question mark, where when you click on that particular symbol, an explanation will be provided for that item. We've tried to provide as much information as we can to help you understand the budget and understand the terminology that goes along with it. And so all of those are available to you as you proceed through that process with the tool. You also will have the ability to enter numbers in the various columns that you feel are appropriate. The tool will automatically do the calculations for you, so you don't have to worry about doing those calculations on your own. We must have a balanced budget in the end. You will notice that the information that you provide at the bottom of the chart will either be depicted in red or green. If they're depicted in red, you will note that your budget is not balanced, and before you can proceed to the next step, you must adjust the numbers to provide a balanced budget. Once you have done that, and you proceed to finalizing your budget proposal, you're asked to provide contact information, and you will receive an acknowledgement email from the tool indicating that we've received your proposal and that it will be archived for future consideration. We will then collect and collate the data for use by the superintendent and the Board of Education to develop the budget, and we may be back in contact with you to ask questions about your proposal as we work through the process. We see this as yet another opportunity for members of the community to engage in a deep, serious review of our budget and to offer meaningful input. We look forward to hearing from you as we move through this budget process.
The budget input tool will be available Friday evening after the last budget input session. The superintendent has held several sessions this week already, the first being on Monday with the employees. The second we held was on Tuesday, October 22nd at Sea Mountain Wright, and that was the first public input session. The final public input session will be Friday, October 25th at 3:30 at Patterson Mill Middle High School in the auditorium. In December, the superintendent will present her proposed budget to the board, at which time it then becomes theirs to consider. They will then hold their own public input sessions in January, the first of which being on Wednesday, January 8th at 6 p.m. The locations are currently being determined at this time and will be presented as soon as they are available. On Monday, January 13th and Wednesday, January 15th, there will be 4 sessions in total on both of those days. You can see that they will be at 12 to 2 and 6 to 8 p.m. We know that we have many parents who work night shift and can't attend sessions during the evening, so we're trying to accommodate all schedules as much as possible. Once the board presents their budget to the county executive then holds his own public input sessions. That schedule for dates, times, and locations can be found at www.hartfordcountymd.gov. This input tool that Mr. Licata mentioned is just one way that you can become involved. All of the traditional tools are still available for you. And at this time, I'm going to turn it back over to Superintendent Canavan to close out our session today.
Thank you, Terry. I would like to encourage everyone to become involved in this budget process. No comment is too small, and your messages are powerful and will be given serious consideration. Once again, thank you for viewing this presentation.